Поскольку к нам приехал гость, мы решили использовать его и в хвост, и в гриву, и узнать от него все, что интересно он знает, поэтому встречайте. Welcome.
Thank you. So can you hear me? Yes, you can. So I'm going to explain you a project I've been working on with a couple of friends of mine. So I've got two babies. The first one was Babylon.js, so I've got a WebGL framework, and I've got a masterclass after that. And the second one is Vorlon. So just start with a name. I don't know if you know the Babylon 5 TV shows, the sci-fi TV shows. Yes, some of you. And my boss is a huge fan of his TV shows, and as he's my boss, he is going to choose a name for me. So that's why we've got Vorlon. Vorlon comes from Babylon 5, so it's a special species. I don't know the TV shows, but apparently this is a strong species. So web is awesome. And I've tried to learn the Russian sentence, but I can't remember how to say it. So, but apparently this is famous. It should be. Let's hope so. So internet is very great. So the web is awesome, but it could be even better. So does it make sense? No? Yes? So I try to understand your culture. This is just the beginning for me, so thank you. It could be better for the debugging experience. So when I start to think about creating a new frameworks with my friends, we've been working with Babylon. We were quite happy about this WebGL frameworks, but it was very specific and targeting very sub-level of the web, which was WebGL and Web Audio. And while thinking about the new frameworks, coding on the web every day, it was very painful to debug on all platforms. So, but the web is cool. It's based on standards. It can be run on a lot of different devices, and it cross-platform by default. And it could be adaptive, meaning that you could do feature detection, be responsive, and do whatever you like. So using the same set of technologies, you can address almost anything in the world. So this is the only technologies that could do that. Some C++ developers sometimes tell me that, yes, C can do that also. No, this is not true. So how to debug them? So we used to have F12, so in Firefox, in Chrome, Opera. So this is not F12 in Opera, but this is the same concept. And sometimes you could end up just using console.log on some platforms because you don't have anything else. On mobile, what you need to do most of the time is proprietary tools. So meaning, if you've got an iPhone, so I like to buy an iPhone, for instance, because it's a great device. If I want to debug it, I also need to buy a Mac. So, and this is a problem for me because I don't have enough money, you know? So I would like to remote debug my iPhone without buying a Mac. But today, you're forced to connect it in a USB. Like, for instance, if you got a Windows phone, you're forced to use Visual Studio. Maybe you don't want to use Visual Studio to remote debug a Windows phone. That could be fair enough. And for Android devices, you've got tools based on Chrome. So every time you're trying to debug a mobile platform, you're using a different tool. There was a project named Wenry, but the project has stopped more or less. And we thought we could do something maybe better, or at least different. So Vorlon.js was born with this idea. The idea was to create a remote web debugging tool based on standards that could be run on any browser, any platforms. So to do that, it's very simple. You just have to use some standard stuff, like JavaScript, of course, Node.js, Express.js, and the main part will be socket.io. So as this is remote-based, we're using WebSocket to communicate between mobile devices and what we call a dashboard that will be the remote F12 tool of any device. So it's hosted on GitHub, so you can fork it, and you can do whatever you would like with it. We've got several plugins. So the idea of Vorlon was to provide you an architecture that will do the job for you to remote communicate with your devices. But our idea was to create like a plugin ecosystem. So we've been working on writing an architecture that will be able to host some plugins. So we've been writing the 3 first plugins. That was the DOM-explorer, the one you will probably use the most, and the console. So the console can log what's going on the mobile remotely, but you can also communicate in the other way. For instance, you can execute some JavaScript directly on the remote mobile. And also, I've been working on the modernizer plugins. So the idea was to create the main one and to show to the community how to create some plugins. And all other plugins has been written by the community a couple of days after we've been launching the product. So we were quite amazed and quite happy. For instance, there is one to specifically debug Angular.js projects. So if you are interested in that, if you're doing some Angular. And there is one for analyzing the resources, and we're going to see that together in a demonstration. So let's review quickly how it runs on my machine. And just after that, if we are lucky enough, I will try to remote debug your phones, if you've got access to the network. So first, this is being hosted in Node.js. So I'm running the server here, and I'm running also a specific page to debug. So I'm going to open the what we're calling the dashboard. So the dashboard is like the remote F12 tool. I'm going to snap it here. And let's say I want to debug something running inside Opera. Here. And remote debug also Firefox. So you can see I have 2 devices connected, or 2 browsers here. So Opera, Firefox, being debugged from Microsoft Edge, which is fun. And the first thing that, imagine that you're currently debugging on different devices, you don't know which devices currently have a problem. Let's say that on the first row, someone tells me this doesn't work on my phone. So I need to know, okay, who are you? So who are you is, I need to identify you. So I'm going to click on this button. And you see I've got some numbers. So Opera is number 1, Firefox is number 2. So I'm currently on number 1 here. And when I'm going to debug number 1, I've got the classic experience I may have, which is something like overing specific stuff, like you see, like you get classic access in DOM-explorer. I can modify the web page remotely. It's going to modify the web page. And I've got access to the console here, so which means that I can execute some code remotely. So hello, because I don't know how to write Привет. Okay. Hello. And I can also check what Opera is supporting. So Opera is based on Blink, so it got a lot of cool features being supported. Let's check, I want to check if it's supporting Gamepad. I can see that it's supporting Gamepad. And now if I want to, imagine you've got an error on your devices, like something complex. You can see that it will be coming back to your dashboards. You will be able to have access to anything being logged by your device directly in the dashboard. So sometimes this is just enough to help you, because I've already had the problem to run that on my Windows phone. The page doesn't run, so maybe I've got an error, but I've got no way to have access to this error, you know? So I need to plug my device in USB, to launch Visual Studio, to attach to this device, just to check, for instance, for a simple console.log. Using that, you're not forced to do it. We've got different kind of plugins, so let's have a look to that together. We've got the My Device one, which provides you the viewport information, the user agent, the current pixel ratio could be useful. You've got access to any objects being hosted by the browser remotely, and you can then inspect them. And finally, we've got the last one, we are pretty happy about that, which is named the best practices. So there was a session on accessibility just before. So what we're trying to do is to inject into our dashboard a kind of plugins that's going to analyze a web page being run remotely and to provide you some advices, just to help you to improve maybe the page. So accessibility currently is based on a specific frameworks. It's very simple. But for instance, I can see that on my page, I've got SVG image without an alt attribute, which is not good for accessibilities. Well, basic things comes like that. I'm not using any ARIA attributes on my web page, so it tries to help me to fix that. For mobile, it's going to check for media queries, if I'm setting a specific viewport. For performance, it's going to check for if you're JZPing it or whatever. And finally, it's checking also if you're not doing browser detection, using some prefixes that shouldn't be run like that. So it tries to help you. So it's currently the first version of the plugin. The idea is could be a community project to try together to think about what would be the best practices when you develop on the web. So you can see this is running fine on my machine. So now maybe the idea would be to test that on your phones. So it could break now, okay? So to do that, you have to navigate on this specific URL on your phone. I'm going to do it also. And you should see the very simple page I've already shown you. So Vorlon RU for Russian version. Yes, you should see a page like that. If not, this means that you don't have access to the network. So how many of you can see the web page? Not that much. You don't want to play my game, that's right. Okay. So let's try on some of you. So I'm going to connect on the dashboard that's currently being hosted in the cloud. I need to log on. And I can see a bunch of different devices being connected over there. So we've got even some BlackBerry, cool, Macintosh, and yes, so you also love Apple devices in Russia, okay? So now I need to identify a specific client. So let's see that I want to debug the iOS version, so number 8. So I'm going to click on identify a client. If it's working fine, you should have a number. Do you have a number? Yes? So who is number 8? You've got an iPhone, that's right. And we don't know each other, okay? This is not a trick or something like that. So I'm going to connect on his iPhone. And normally, you should see some yellow stuff around your page. So I can say, for instance, modify the page just for you. Did it work? Yes? You've got to trust him, because I can't do that on every phone. We don't have enough time. And I can check with Modernizer what iOS is supporting, so a lot of different cool things. And what I could do also is do whatever I like. I could say, I could execute some code like hello again, and you should see that. Yes. So we can now maybe have a private chat, which is cool. I don't have access to the file system. So let's talk about security right now. I can just do what the web page can do. So if the browser can access to the file system, I could do it, but I'm not sure I can have access to the file system on iOS. So I can check his devices. So I can see that this is maybe not the last version of the iPhone. Which version of iPhone do you have? 6. Okay, which is a good one, okay. And what I could do also, having the Resource Explorer, currently my page doesn't use session storage, cookies, or local storage, but I could introspect that also to check your cookies. So don't put that directly in production, of course. Otherwise, you can do whatever with your users. But you see the point. Now, yes, you've been clicking on something, apparently. Yes, on the web page. And you can see that it's clicking on the web page, and it's generating some console.something, and I've got access from the dashboard. So thanks to that, let's say that you've got a specific problem on the web page on CSS. You could go on here, have access to the style, have access to the compute layout, and modify some CSS in live to modify the layout on your iPhone. So it's better to have your iPhone near you because it's complex otherwise. And then you will be able to modify that. You see, so it's working perfectly fine on any devices. So maybe I can remote debug another device, but you get the point. It's very easy. So let's see now how to put that in production. How to use Vorlon.js. So it's pretty simple. The idea was that in a very simple way you can install it. So the first thing that the easy way to do it is using npm, using sudo on the Macintosh or npm directly on the Windows machine. So you're going to say npm install -g Vorlon, and then you're going to run Vorlon. And you will have access to the dashboard, and or you can fork our GitHub repo, which is over there. Or we've got a button I can show you. So I don't know if you're interested in Windows Azure, which is our cloud platforms. If you are a Azure customer, you can one-click deploy to Azure directly the global solution, because Azure is able to take the GitHub repo and install everything on top of Node.js. So you've got three versions, three different ways to deploy it. And now, this is for the server part, how to configure the client part to be able to be debugged from the dashboard. So this is very easy. You just have to set up a single line of code, a script code. It's got to be at the beginning of the page, because what we are doing is we're using JavaScript to, for instance, for the console object, we're using JavaScript to inject our code to replace the default console1. So when you will call console.log, you will first call our code. We will do our stuff to push that on WebSocket on the dashboard, and then execute the previous console.log native function, if you like to. And this is the way we are doing all plugins that need to inspect what you're doing at the web page. If we are not the first one to be called, if you start to using console.log at the beginning of your page and we are not loaded yet, we don't know what you've done before being loaded, of course. And that's all, folks. So it's very easy, okay? But people say that, okay, but if I don't want to modify my web page because it's currently, I want to remote debug any web page, and I don't want to inject that in my web page. So what we've been doing, we've been creating a proxy for that, because we had so many times the same question during the conferences. We decided to create a proxy on top of Node.js. This is in the last version of our, on the GitHub we've got. And I can show it to you, how it works. So simply go to the, so let's close that. Go on localhost, and you've got HTTP proxy. And for instance, let's say that I want to debug bing.com. So bing.com, who knows Bing? Okay, oh, it's a stupid joke, okay. So it's going to open, you see, with a specific URL over there, the bing.com website. And the idea is that the bing.com will go through my own proxy while I will inject myself the script and then go back to the dashboard, so like any proxy. And we will pass the cookies, we will do everything you need to make it work like normally. And you can see that now I can debug Bing, trying to, oops. Oh. I tried to debug Bing. You see, I can do whatever I like with the web page. So just imagine now that you're using this proxy to, on your mobile, you could remote debug your website in production using the proxy like that without injecting in production the script version. But if you are in the development phase, you don't care about putting a single line of script to enable debugging. So fairly easy to install. Now maybe you're interested in how to create a plugin. So we're going to see that together. So this is the last part of the conferences. So we've got an article, and it's also linked in our documentation on bit.ly/Vorlon plugins that explain you how to create your own plugins. And we're going to see the architectures together. So our idea was to be very simple to be used, And to create also plugin in a very simple way. It's a bit more complex to write plugins than to use them, of course, but it shouldn't be that complex. So the idea was, I was thinking about coming from a classical pattern where you've got HTML and CSS in different files and your JavaScript being executed. So this is the first way you could write your plugin is to test it directly in your own browser locally. And then you need to split part of the logic. The HTML and CSS part will be in the dashboard, which means that the thing that will remote debug your stuff. And the JavaScript will be split in two files. The client part that will run on my device, here, and the dashboard part that will be the receiver that will get the data from the client and will display it using HTML. But you could also have communication in the opposite way. Using socket.io, meaning that this is a debugged website where you've got your plugin running. It's going to push data back to socket.io using Node.js and go back to the dashboard. For instance, this is the way Modernizer is working. So I just want to push some data on the dashboard. But for the interactive console plugins, it's doing both ways, meaning that if you say the console.log is going to go over there, but if I say alert or any JavaScript commands, I can go back over there to execute some code or to push whatever I like to do. Okay? So based on the plugin you like to write, you are in charge of the complexity or of the communication process. So let's review some codes to understand how it works. And I'm currently writing a draft plugins. That's not finished yet, but it's just for you, just to show you what I'm working on currently. So let's open that with Visual Studio Code. And let's have a look to, so Vorlon.js has been written in TypeScript again, because I'm a huge fan of TypeScript. And if you want to write a plugin, you can write in JavaScript. You're not forced to use TypeScript. But if you want to do it in TypeScript, you can do it using Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, on a Mac, on a Linux machine, whatever. It's really cross-platforms. So it gives you how it works. So I was making jokes about C# developer, C++. To be honest, sometimes it's interesting to work on interface, stuff like that. So this is what we've got here. So we've got an interface to implement, which is a client plugin, which provides you the core mechanism to communicate between the server and the client. And you've got a bunch of methods to implement. So the first one is a constructor, which is super simple here. And also, in this case, I've got a different method that is my own method. So the idea of this plugin is to have information from the devices, like the pixel ratio, so you can see how we are computing it here. And then here is the code that's going to be run on the client side, so on your device if you want to. The first thing I will load is something like require, but it's not like require, but I need some specific JavaScript file to execute, so I'm going to load them in an async way. So these two different files. And once they are ready to be used, I will call the refresh method. And also adding an event listener to the resize version. I'm going to show you why. And doing that, let's have a look to the refresh method. Which is there. If my two libraries are not being loaded yet, I'm returning. If it is the case, I'm going to have access to the user agent here, to the meta viewport information, resolution, and I'll put everything inside some JSON objects. And at the end, I'm going to put that in a specific collection, data, on the client side still. And finally, you've got a unique function to call, which is send to dashboard with your JSON object. So you have been preparing everything you need on the client side, and you send that to the dashboard. And Vorlon.js is in charge of doing the communication process to identify which session you are currently connected to and how to communicate with your dashboard. So we are handling all that for you. So let's see now what happened on the dashboard side. The dashboard will have access to the data and will simply then fill some HTML to show you. So you are in charge of taking back the data, analyzing the data if you like to, and display them in the dashboard. So if we want to see how it works, let's rerun this one. And let's display the device version, which is my device here. And normally, you can see the screen width over there. And if I'm moving my window, it's moving in real time for a specific reason, because I've been listening to the resize event, and I'm then sending back just the data to the dashboard. I just get this data and then updating the dashboard side. So this is a very simple plugin to understand how it works. You could start by reading this code if you want to write your own plugins, and it will be easy to do. Now my next project, so I've got 4 minutes left, is to do something different. So I've been implementing the web audio stack in Babylon.js, and sometimes it's not very easy to debug. And the best browser to debug is not the Microsoft version. So I've got, this is using web audio, so you can't listen, but this is not important. And the best tool, to my point of view, is Firefox. So let's open Firefox, and I'm going to show you what I like to mimic. If you press F12, you've got web audio, you can reload it. And this is awesome. It's going to write the graph of the audio nodes using SVG. So it's very, very useful to debug your code, because otherwise, maybe you've done a mistake by creating a specific audio node and connecting to the wrong one, or maybe you're setting the wrong properties, but it's difficult to debug. And I was thinking about that. I want that on all platforms. Well, at least on my own platforms. But using Vorlon.js, it will be available on all platforms. So let me show you what I'm currently doing to make it work. And I need to close this thing and this thing. And let's review the current version of the code. So web audio on the client side. So on the client side, what I need to do is to introspect any native web audio code, meaning that if you're calling the connect method on the audio node, what I will do is I will call first my code that will listen to that. And I will register this audio node, meaning that, OK, so this audio node has been connected to another one, so I will save the graph in a way in a JSON format or whatever. And I will then listen to whatever you will doing. If you're starting an audio node, you started to play music or sound or whatever. I'm listening to that. If you try to create a buffer, to create a gain node, to create a banner to make some 3D sound, I'm trying to listen to whatever web audio code you may call and inject my code first. So this is the first part. And what I've done that, so this is just a prototype currently. When I've done that, what I will do at the end is to send that to the dashboard. On the dashboard side, currently this is very, very basic. The only thing I'm doing is I'm filling some text like a console.log on the dashboard side, just to start to see that my code starts to listen to what web audio is doing on the client side. So let's execute this version of Vorlon. So it's currently in Vorlon.js, web audio. It should run, yes. And now, as you can see, I just add the script I was talking before to execute Vorlon on the web page. So it will call my code. And now if I'm executing this page in Microsoft Edge, so I've got the sound, and I need to go back to my dashboard. And hopefully, it should work. Or not. Yes. Or not. Yes. And you can see this is very basic, but I can see that I've been connecting an audio buffer source node to the gain node, which is the volume, the audio buffer node to the graph, and I can have 6.2 is the number of the node I'm currently connecting. So now the main job is to transform that into an SVG graph. So there still is a lot of job to do. But to give you an idea, I can introspect anything on the client side to remote debug that on the dashboard side, just to give you an idea of how to do more complex things than just logging basic information. So if you want to contribute, you're more than welcome. So we are currently 4 to 5 developers. Most of us are French, but we are able to talk English, you see. So we are happy to work with you. And there is a lot of different issues currently open. We're listening to the issue. If you got an idea of plugins, something we could enhance on the Vorlon.js products, you can open an issue or discuss with us on Twitter, and we will be more than happy to discuss with you. Thank you.
Hi. Hello. I misunderstood some things. Well, when I have one project on localhost, it looks nice when I open one window, one browser, another browser on my local machine. It looks very good. But I have a lot of projects. I use virtual hosts, and I want to debug my sites by other host names. What should I do in that case?
If you want on a remote machine, virtual machine? Or?
No, I have all projects on my local machine, but I can use virtual hosts. Well, some local project.dev. And local project.dev on my local machine will be another than when I enter the same address on my phone. Yes, it connects to the same net, Wi-Fi or LAN, but it will be different hosts on my phone and on my local machine.
Yes,
my phone just will not, it won't see my local host.dev.
Yes, you need, the first thing you need to do is to publish your website on a public.
So I need to publish.
Yes. Otherwise, you can make your private network accessible to your phone in local Wi-Fi or whatever. Yes. So the main point is that, well, for instance, within Microsoft, we got our private network, and we can connect using our Wi-Fi, and I can debug it using localhost. I can host, for instance, IIS or Apache on this machine, and then expose it to any phones during the development process. But it's true that most of the time what we're doing now is we are deploying that on the cloud platform, well, it could be Azure, Amazon, Google, whatever, just to host the code, because it's much easier most of the time than discussing with your IT to allow you to connect with your phone on your web server. I know it's painful sometimes.
Thank you.
Я напоминаю, что вопрос можно задать по-русски, если стесняетесь. Я попробую перевести. Вы видели, у меня почти получилось в предыдущий раз.
Так, слышно, да? Я задам по-русски, чтобы, собственно говоря, люди поняли. Вопрос такой. Есть ли возможность проксировать сами JS-файлы, то есть, грубо говоря, оборачивать код в какие-то вызовы. Просто если такая возможность у Vorlon есть, то существует два уже готовых очень крутых проекта, Trace.js и Artwolf. Один из них профайлер для JavaScript, а второй дебаггер для JavaScript. То есть с помощью Vorlon.js можно будет отлаживать и трейсить JavaScript, ну то есть полностью выкинуть F12 Developer Tools и тому подобное.
Is there a way to proxy JavaScript files that you pass to Vorlon.js, for example? If it is possible, there will be a way to completely avoid F12 tools and use those libraries he mentioned?
Trace.js and Artwolf.
Yeah.
So the idea would be to
wrap existing JavaScript files you pass through Vorlon.js into like proxy them, basically. And if it would be possible, it would extend abilities of this project.
Well, this is a good idea. Maybe you could share that on our GitHub. And
well, I gladly share, but the main question is, can I actually parse through the proxy JavaScript file? For example, in my app, I have main.js, and I want to argument each line of that, add some extra code that would allow me, for example, to trace JavaScript files, to debug them using synchronous XHR requests.
We currently, today, no, we don't have these features. And,
but it's possible to extend Vorlon.js?
Yes, sure. It's definitely possible. The proxy, everything is open source, so everything can be changed and extends. And if you got the idea, the main thing you could do is really create an issue. And if the teams really think it could be helpful for everybody who will spend time on it, if we think that it's really specific to your case, we will tell you in a very kind manner you could do it yourself because it is open source. So, but the first thing is really to share your ID, because the proxy stuff came from the different audience we had that was saying, this is great, but I don't want to inject a single line of script for various reasons. And we end up writing the proxy, so thank you.
Еще?
Yes, one more question. I'm sorry. Did you saw Way and Rare project? Because it looks the same.
Yeah. And so why did we decide to go on our way?
Yes.
Okay. And for two reasons. First reason, it was more or less based on WebKit stuff, and it's using a host based on WebKit. And we didn't, but the main thing that we didn't like the experience globally, and the project wasn't any live anymore. There wasn't any contribution. And you know what happened when an open source project, you don't have any news for 2 years, 3 years. This is really bad news. And we decided to work on our way to have a new architectures. And the main thing that came out of this architecture was the plugin systems. And because we really think that once the core will be stable enough and finished, that we won't have any bug. What could be really useful is a plugin ecosystem, like the web audio, for instance. Mozilla had a great idea about the web audio stuff, but if we have a plugin that open source can run everywhere, it's much better. So it was really the idea, and my dream will be able to inject Vorlon in F12 tools of Chrome or Edge or whatever, through an extension and in this way, Vorlon will be able to load some plugins in any debugging tools to really help you. So this is one of my ideas. And another idea is, maybe you don't ask the question, but JavaScript, how to debug JavaScript. This is very hard because there is no standard way to do that. So Chrome got a specific way to do that through sockets, like Mozilla, but it's very hard to connect to this different stuff. So the idea of Vorlon also is to put pressure on people to say that we should maybe think about the standard way of debugging JavaScript. Today it's too complex, so we've started doing it, but we stopped it. It was too time-consuming and too hard to do it.
Thank you.
Очень коротко один, пожалуйста.
Hello.
Hello.
How much users can I connect to Vorlon.js, and can I disconnect them? Or connect to Vorlon.js on demand from my phone or other device?
Yes, this is a good question. So how many people, it really depends on the server that's going to host the server version of Node.js. So for instance, the first time I was hosting the first demos in Azure, I was using the free version. because I don't want to use my own credit card on my own cloud system. And the free version got limitation like 5 to 10 WebSocket connection at the same times, and my demo was failing at the beginning. So I had to have a strong enough server to be able to maintain enough WebSocket connection, So the answer is it depends on whether you or not you're using IIS, Apache, and a strong enough server. But we've been able to demo on 300 devices on the same time in big rooms, and it was okay. It really depends on the bandwidth. Then by default, it's connecting to all devices one by one. So in the next version, we are thinking about broadcasting to all devices. And we're also thinking about enabling it on demand for a specific device, because some of the people want to put that in production, which wasn't the first goal. The first goal was really to help you in the development process. But people then think that it could be very useful to have something in production. I've got a user that is far away from me, and I just want to enable remote debug for this guy. So we currently, this is part of our roadmap to publish a guide on how to do that. And just follow us on Twitter or on Vorlon, we will show how to do that. But we have just some very basic authentication today based on passport, so it's basic clear text, so you can put HTTPS on top of that. But the first version wasn't really meant to do that. So we'll still need to improve also the security part, because if you want to enable that on your web server, we need to pay attention on security. But this is part of our roadmap also.
Thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you.